For those of you who don't know me, my name's Pastor Liz. I'm the children's pastor here at Crossroads, and it's I love being with the kids, obviously, but it's really special being with the adults this week. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to share what God has put on my heart to share. So I want to tell you that I have always wanted to be a runner. Yeah, I've always dreamed of it. And especially when I hear someone else talking about their experience running, much like Pastor Tim did a couple weeks ago, I think, yeah, I want to be a runner. And this feeling only magnifies when I open up Facebook and I see people running 5Ks and 10Ks and half marathons and marathons, and I think, yes, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a runner. So the morning of my first run, I wake up, I put on my running gear, I put on my brand new running shoes, I open up my computer to see my meticulously planned running strategy for me, to see exactly what I'm going to run today, and I go out and I start my first run on my first day, ready to be a runner. And 2 minutes in, I realize, oh yeah, I don't enjoy feeling like I'm going to die. And I quit. I don't become a runner. And you see, what I've always lacked here is that I didn't think it through. I only pictured myself being in great shape, relieving stress, joining the community of runners, winning races. But I never once stopped to think what it would actually cost me. I never stopped to think what I would do when it was difficult, painful even. And I wonder if that is also why some of our New Year's resolutions die. I wonder if it's that we think about the goal and we think about the hope and we think about what we want, but we don't ever stop to think what it will cost us. And so this whole series, we've been talking about how to rebuild your life. And we've been using Nehemiah as a model and example for how to do that. In our first week in this series, Tim talked about Nehemiah 1 and reminded us how important it is to start in prayer. Then the next week, he talked about Nehemiah 2 and how important it is to bring others in, to share our struggles and our hopes and dreams with other people. And this week, I'm going to invite all of us to really think through what this commitment will entail. So we're going to do that by looking at Nehemiah 3 today. Now, I'm going to tell you, this chapter is a very, very, very long list of names and what they built. But I invite you this morning to open up to Nehemiah 3 so you can have a look for yourself. But I'm going to tell you that I am not going to read the entire chapter to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read the first 2 verses so that you can get a taste of what this chapter's like. But like I said, I invite you to open up your Bibles, open up your phones to Nehemiah 3 so you can see what I mean. But I'm going to read for you the first 2 verses. I'm not going to have you stand because I'll have you stand in a little bit. But here we go, Nehemiah 3, 1 and 2. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zakur, son of Imri, built next to them. So this then continues on for another 30 verses. You're welcome for not reading all 32 to you. But I want you to see all the groups and names that are listed in Nehemiah 3. So here they are. It's really tiny text because there's a lot of people mentioned. There are 41 different building crews listed in Nehemiah 3, and they work together to build or rebuild, repair 42 different sections of this wall. And okay, that's a lot of people to wrap your mind around, but keep this in mind that each of these names is the leader of their group. Some of these were rulers of their districts or half districts. Some of these were heads of households. And no matter what, if it was mentioned a ruler of a district, probably that whole district came to help. And if it was a head of a household, that means that their whole family and or the extended family came to help. Scholars guess that there were probably several thousand people that are actually mentioned in these 41 groups that included several thousand people came together to build this wall, to rebuild this wall. See, one thing I want to point out up here, okay, so let's have a look. It has the north wall, west wall, south wall, east wall. Okay, under east wall, there's like 20 different people there. You know who I feel so sorry for here? Poor Malchijah. Like, what in the world? Nehemiah's like, okay, 20 of you, go over there. Malchijah, you got the south wall, right? Just go. I mean, the poor guy. But in all seriousness, though, I'm really glad Nehemiah 3 was included. Even though it's not the most exhilarating to read, and let me tell you, I've read it so many times to prepare for this, it's not the most exhilarating to read. I'm really glad that Nehemiah 3 wasn't just, they came together to build a wall. They came together to repair the wall. I'm glad that it was not just one sentence. Because if it was just one sentence, we would miss how big of a job this was. I mean, look at all the people who had to come together to work. And if we had just seen the sentences of they rebuilt the wall, we wouldn't understand the magnitude of this project. It'd be kind of equivalent to me reading on Facebook, and she ran a marathon. It's easy to say, it's easy to type that, it doesn't take long, but we all know that it's hours and hours and hours of painful work. And this is what it was for them too. I'm very grateful that we have Nehemiah 3 to remind us of that. Now I want to show you a map of what they think this wall would have looked like. We don't have the wall anymore to know, so this is an educated guess. But the text in Nehemiah 3 starts at the sheep gate. If you look at the top left, there's the sheep gate there. That's where it starts. And then it goes down and around, and then the end of Nehemiah 3 ends with the sheep gate. So this is a circle, circling around the temple and the greater Jerusalem area, okay? So a few things I want to point out here. They estimate that this gate was 2 to 2.5 miles in length, enclosing between 90 and 250 acres of land. This was no small task. This was a huge undertaking. Now, if you look, what I love about this is it color codes the different building groups. So all 41 of the groups are mentioned up here, as well as a color of what section they estimate that they were given. Have you noticed that some of them are given huge sections and some really tiny? This is because, and the text actually uses two different words, rebuilt, repair. Some of them had to repair the wall. It probably was still standing pretty well. They just had to put a few bricks up. And so they were given huge sections. And others of them were given little tiny sections because they had to rebuild it, sometimes from scratch. Now, okay, we felt so sorry for Malchijah, but when you look at this map, you're like, okay, Malchijah, no big deal, because look, it's itty-bitty little south wall, itty-bitty, and there's Malchijah, do you see him? And actually, technically, he shared it with Hanan, didn't he? So, yeah, we don't have to feel sorry for Malchijah, do we? It was fine. It was fair. But yes, it's so cool to see this. Now, the text in Nehemiah 3 kind of centers around the 10 gates. And these gates were more than just openings in the wall. The people had to, the gates had rooms next to it. Sometimes people actually lived in those rooms. So sometimes it could have been their homes. The text in Nehemiah 3 also talks about how people repaired next to their homes. Did you know that people had homes actually up next to this wall? So much so that one of the walls of their homes would have been this wall. And so when it said that they repaired near their homes, they might have been repairing their homes at the same time. Now, here's what's amazing. Excavations have found that this wall was 8 feet thick at some points. This was no small task. And here is the most incredible part. These people, these several thousand Jews, came together and finished this wall in 52 days. Yeah. And here's what's amazing. Like, I'm thinking about the United States with all our modern conveniences, okay? It takes the average professional construction crew 8 to 10 months to finish a single-family home. 8 to 10 months. And these people did it in less than 2 months, and they didn't even have a Home Depot. Yeah, it's incredible. Here's the thing, guys. The people in Nehemiah 3, they knew the cost. They knew that it would require hard labor. They knew that they would have to put their lives on hold. They knew that they were going to have to work with other people, maybe people they didn't get along with. They knew all those things, and they did it. They knew the cost, and they did it anyways. They kept their sights on the idea that this wall will be finished, and they knew the cost, and they did it anyways. I wonder if this is how we can look at the commitments we make. For example, it's easy for us to say, New Year's resolution, okay, maybe a common one is, okay, I want to lose weight. It's easy for us to say that, I want to lose weight. But it actually costs us a lot. It's hard, it's difficult, it requires sacrifices. And we too, just like these Jews, have to know the cost ahead of time in order for us to truly stick to these commitments we want to make. And I wonder if in order for us to truly make a commitment, like a New Year's resolution, if it requires us to count the cost ahead of time. Now, I want to define what I mean by count the cost. It means to fully understand and accept the significant sacrifices required for the commitment. Another way I like to put this is to read the fine print of a commitment. Okay, you go and you sign a contract, and they have all these little itty-bitty words, hoping you won't read it so you don't know what will actually happen to you if you sign this. Us counting the cost on a commitment we want to make is like us reading the fine print of that commitment. What will this actually mean? Yes, I want to lose weight. Yes, I want to be in shape. Yes, I want to be healthier. But what will it actually mean? And I think this text of Nehemiah 3 is inviting us in our commitments to count the cost before that commitment starts. That we've truly thought through what this will cost us. Then we accept it, and then we stick to it. Count the cost. So I want to be as practical as I can be here. So I want to give you an example of what it might look like to count the cost. So here we go. Maybe, let's say your goal is, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. So let's count the cost. I'm going to have to say no to foods I enjoy. And the one that's especially hard for me with this one is when you're at a party and everyone's eating cake. Everyone is. And you have to say, no, not for, like, that's the hardest thing, to say no when everyone's enjoying that amazing food. Okay, get up earlier to exercise. Okay, this means you're going to have to maybe either go to bed earlier or get less sleep. Like, you're going to have to get up and exercise even when you feel like you got hit by a train. Okay, get off the couch. Okay, I can't be lazy. I'm going to have to get off the couch. Delay gratification. Oh, and that last one, okay, face discomfort. That's why I quit running. Because, yeah, it's going to hurt. It's not going to be comfortable. It's going to be awful. There's going to be moments that I hate this commitment I've made. It's going to be awful. And then what you do is you look at that list of potential costs. I mean, none of us can know the future, so you don't know for sure, but you look at that list of potential costs, and then you ask yourself this: am I willing to accept the cost? Am I willing to accept this? Am I willing to be in pain? Am I willing to not eat 2 scoops of ice cream when everyone else is? Am I willing to sit and wait? And I said delayed gratification. Maybe that means, am I willing to continue in this commitment even if I'm not seeing the pounds go away? Am I willing to wait? Am I willing to be uncomfortable? And if I am, yes, I will be committed. Yes, I will do this. See, we count the cost so that we're not surprised when it gets hard. I can't help but think back to my intro, where I so desperately wanted to be a runner, and I was ready to commit. But I was surprised when it hurt. And I can't help but think, what would that have looked like if I had prepared myself ahead of time? I think one of the most important commitments we make in life, one of the most important commitments, is that of marriage. And I think in our marriage is where we can see the importance of counting the cost. I have up here some traditional vows. On your wedding day, you see the couple, and they get together, and they're just so blissfully in love. Like, I love weddings. Oh. And they get together, and they look into each other's eyes, and they say vows. A lot of times they say these traditional ones. I take you to be my wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward. Now, I bolded this part on purpose. For better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health. Do you see what's happening here? These traditional vows have become tradition because it is asking that couple to count the cost before the commitment has been made. So I'm very happily married. There are days where marriage is wonderful. There are days where marriage is hard and it hurts. What about those days where you don't feel loved? What about those days where you don't even like the person you're looking at? What about those days where you are bankrupt and you have no money and now you don't, like, life is so hard and heavy and I still have to commit? See, this is an effort to get that couple to look into each other's eyes and count the cost of this marriage. So that you say, yes, I will love you when life is great, but I will also love you when you don't provide for me my needs. I will love you when it's easy to love you, but I'm going to love you too when it's hard. Do you see how this is us counting the cost? And there are a lot of amazing things about marriage, and I love it. One thing that is so neat about marriage is that it gives us a picture of what it looks like to follow Jesus. Did you know that count the cost is actually a biblical phrase taught to us by Jesus himself? And so that text where Jesus is teaching us is my text for today, in which I'm going to have you stand. So would you open up your Bibles to Luke 14, 25 to 30, and would you stand with me for the reading of God's word? Here it is. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it? For if you lay the foundation and are not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule you, saying, 'This person began to build and wasn't able to finish.'" This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. So the very first thing I want to do when looking at this text is I want to talk about, in my opinion, one of the more difficult passages of the Bible. Here it is, verse 26. "If anyone comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brother and sisters, yes, even their own life, such a person cannot be my disciple." So Jesus is telling us that we have to hate our families to follow him. I want to clarify that word hate. He's using a hyperbole here. He's not using hate literally, he's not using it literally here. He's telling us that in comparison to how much you love Jesus, you've got to love Jesus so much more, incomparably more than your family. It's as if you hated them. He's not telling us to hate because we know everywhere else Jesus tells us how important it is to love. So obviously you're supposed to love your family. But that love of your family is never supposed to even compare to the love of Jesus. And a way that I like to think of it, rather than comparing, I like to think of it this way. It's that Jesus is the one you love. God is the one you love with all that you are. And of course you're going to love your family because the love of your family is going to outpour from the love of Jesus. So it is really that God is the only one you love. And of course you're going to love your family because you love Jesus. It all starts and ends with Jesus. And that's what Jesus is telling us. He's telling us that that is a requirement. That is the cost. And so Jesus is telling us that the cost of discipleship is complete submission to God. He's telling us right now there's a cost to following him. It's complete submission. He doesn't just want us on Sunday mornings. He doesn't just want us 15 minutes before we go to bed while we do our devotionals. He wants every moment, every part of us. And he's saying that if you want to follow me, the cost is complete submission. Everything else we give up to God. Now, here's the thing that's tricky about this cost, is that we don't know what this is actually going to look like. What does complete submission look like? We don't know the future, so we don't know. I'm going to tell you, he was saying this to the disciples. To the disciples, complete submission meant violent persecution for all and martyrdom for most. That's what their picture of complete submission was for them. Probably for us, I don't know. Probably that's not going to be what complete submission looks like for us. I don't know the future. But it does mean that we need to be prepared and willing. Maybe for us, complete submission is going to look like moving away from our family. Maybe complete submission means living with fewer means so that we can be more generous. Maybe complete submission looks like being treated differently by our friends. For me, complete submission looked like giving up my hopes, dreams, and plans of being a stay-at-home mom. We have to be so close and so in tune with God that we can know what's getting in the way, and we can know what complete submission looks like for each of us. But see, Jesus is telling us here that this is the cost of following him. Now, then he goes into an analogy in which he talks about a tower that was started and unfinished. Have you ever driven by a building that was started but they didn't finish it? It's sad. I always drive by and think, what happened? What happened? Why? How much money and time was wasted in that? And now it's ugly and a waste of space. How sad. And what Jesus is saying is that when we commit and quit, we're like this. Sad. Wasted time, wasted efforts. It's sad. And he's telling us that this is an image of what it can look like when we quit. I can't help but think back to Nehemiah 3, how they were tasked with something that was very difficult, but they finished it. They counted the cost, and they got it done. And Jesus here is inviting us to do the same. He's made it very clear the cost for us to follow him, and it's complete submission. And here through this text, he's inviting us to consider in advance what a commitment to discipleship requires. For us to be prepared and think about it now, before the difficulty comes. One thing that I love so much is that Jesus is the perfect example of counting the cost. See, God didn't start a redemptive process to save the world without being prepared. And then when Jesus was sent here, he was prepared to pay the final sacrifice to save us. He looked out at the world and at Jerusalem fully prepared for the sacrifices that were needed for him. And there's no better place for us to see Jesus counting the cost than at the Garden of Gethsemane. And here at the Garden of Gethsemane is where Jesus went hours before his arrest so that he would ultimately be killed on the cross in an excruciating death. And Jesus went to the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. And this is what he says in his prayer. We have his prayers in Luke. He said, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me, yet not my will, but yours be done." And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like drops of blood falling to the ground. You can see Jesus' anguish. He's sitting there thinking about the cost that he's going to have to pay. He's thinking about the cost to saving us. And I love this. You know what he says to God the Father? He says, not my will, but yours be done. He submits. And we can see his anguish. He's thinking about what's coming and what he has to do. And this is what I love so much, guys. He's thinking about the world, and he knows that saving us is worth it. And notice that he is preparing himself for that sacrifice before it's come. And he's now inviting us to do that now, to count the cost. He's inviting us to be his disciple. And he's saying, I want you to count the cost now so that you are prepared when it gets hard. So count the cost. Here's the very exciting part about both of our texts for today, is that we are not to do it alone. Nehemiah, he had 41 building crews with him. And Jesus, he had his 12 disciples. And you know, the message he gave to his disciples was to pick up the cross and follow him. But they did not do it alone. When they were tasked with the job of starting the church after Jesus' resurrection, they were together. They had each other. So I want you to look around this room. As we are making the commitments and counting the cost, don't do it alone. Bring other people in. Share with each other what God is putting on your heart to change as you rebuild your life. Join a small group. Share with one another. Don't do it alone. So I used to be a teacher, and so because of that, there's something I love. Homework. I have homework for you. Sometime today, don't let time pass. So many times we intend, we have intentions, and then time makes the decision for us, right? Don't let time pass. Sometime today, I want you to sit down and write down one thing that you feel God is leading you to in a rebuilt life. Maybe you're going to step back and take the big picture and be like, wow, God, you're calling me to that life of complete submission. And I realize that I'm following you on Sunday mornings, but I'm not following you the rest of my life. I realize that's what you're calling me to. Then write that down. But maybe you're thinking, God's really leading me to correct some of the things in my life. Like, I want to be more healthier. I want to spend more time with my kids. So maybe you're doing big picture, or maybe you're doing something more close, zoomed in. But I want you to list all the possible costs that you could think of. Write them down. There's something significant about writing rather than just thinking. Write them down. We don't know the future. So we don't know what God is going to be calling you to give up. We don't know. But write down everything that you can think of. And then I want you to look at that list of costs and then decide, am I willing to accept that? Am I willing to do that? Am I willing to do this one? And then if you decide that you are willing, that's when you can commit. Can you do that for me sometime today? Here's what's so cool about this, guys, is that if this is a goal that God is calling you to, then the goal is going to be worth the cost. It is going to. The goal will be worth it. And a life lived for Jesus, it's not easy. It's hard. There's going to be moments where it's going to be hurt. It's going to hurt. It's hard. But I'm going to tell you, every single time, Jesus is worth the cost. Every single time, Jesus is worth the cost. So I invite you today, consider the cost. Think it through. Be prepared. And then commit. You will not regret it.